The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Jeffrey Epstein. He's been called the most infamous pedophile in American history. And it appears there is more information that the government is still holding back from the American people. Oh, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. It is what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crime Buster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crime Buster. Glad to have you on the Charlie Crime Train today. We're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, that story that just keeps on going on and on and on. Even though this wealthy guy died in a jail cell, that story keeps living. We're going to talk about it today. Seemingly people today want to know more about the mysterious Jeffrey Epstein. Well, you got it on today's program. But first, let me take a moment to welcome you if you're a first-time listener or a seasoned listener to the podcast. We'd love every new listener that we get each week, and we're thankful for thousands of downloads on this program. I would like to invite you to reach out with a shout-out. We call it Reach Out with a Shout-Out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And we'd love for you to check out our sponsor, peacemakernetwork.com. Go right on over there, and you can find out all about those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We're going to put all that in our show notes. All you got to do is hit the links. All right, let's get into today's program. You know, this guy, well, let me put it this way. Another investment banker said back in the day, before the world had heard of Jeffrey Epstein, that as far as financial circles goes, well, most everyone has heard of him. But nobody seems to know what the hell he is up to, quote unquote, by the way. And just this past week, I was hearing someone very popular on the American media platform. Well, this guy was talking about the fact that he could not figure out where Epstein got his money from. How did he become so rich with such few clients? And oh, rich he was. He owned a fleet of planes, not one, but a fleet of planes. He owned a sweeping villa in one of the richest zip codes in America, Palm Beach, Florida. It was a 51,000 square feet castle in Santa Fe. Thousands of acres on his Zero Ranch in Arizona. Owned 2 private islands in the Caribbean. Big time expensive mansion in New York City, townhouse there. Well, in fact, they said that when he died, that he was worth almost $600 million. 600,000 millions of dollars. I misspoke there. Not too far from being a billionaire, and it was billionaires that he worked with. But let me ask you, we know that he's already dead, so why is this story still living? I believe it's living because of unanswered questions. Unanswered questions. Think with me now, why is the government not releasing some of this information that has previously been sealed, but other information that they can release right now that they're not releasing? Why are they not releasing all the information? And how did he get rich? Did he get rich by his work, or was he involved in some other nefarious scheme by other governments? Another question, why did he get away for so many years as a serial sex abuser? Sex abuser of minors. Becomes the worst sex abuser ever by his numbers. How did he abuse so many young girls and just get a slap on the wrist for it earlier? Another question, we all know now that his cohort in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, is in prison. But are there others tied to this scheme? that should be in prison also? And last but not least, how did he really die? Well, we may not answer all these questions in this episode, but we will talk about things that you may not know about this case. And as in any case, we always share with you the best way to get your handle around a case, well, follow that timeline. And I think the timeline is very important for us to clear up today because this case, well, it has actually lasted decades when you think about it. So you all go back to the very first time that this case becomes a case. You have to go all the way back to March of the year 2005. There are police in Palm Beach, Florida. Well, they begin investigating Epstein. Well, why did they do that? Well, a family of a 14-year-old girl. Well, they reported that she was molested at his mansion. The story comes that she got in a fight at school. They checked her purse and found $300 in it. They begin to inquire, how did these $300 get in this purse? And the fight in school? Well, somebody had called this young lady a whore after they heard that she had gone to Epstein to give one of those quote-unquote massages. It is just code word for being abused sexually. And they got in a fight. The $300 became well known. Parents found out about it. Parents went to the police. Then the police found out that there were multiple underage girls, many of them high school students, who would tell the police the same thing. So in May 2006, now they had done their investigation, they signed the paperwork, the police department did, to charge Epstein multiple counts of unlawful sex with a minor. Multiple counts. I'm talking about they had enough information, 37 girls we know, but they had enough information to put this guy away for most of his life, if not his entire life. But then, at first, county prosecutors ready to say, we got a cut and dry case here. We're going to slam the door on him. But then there was some waffling, and the state attorney there took an unusual step of just sending the case to the grand jury. Now, the thing about a grand jury is that it's secretive. So, unlike in public court where they bring all the charges and you can read about them and you know exactly what the evidence is the prosecutor is putting before the grand jury, in the grand jury it's all secret. But we do know this. We do know that he had enough information from the police investigation to bring multiple charges against Epstein. But instead, whatever evidence the prosecutor decided to bring to the grand jury, well, they only indicted him on one single count of soliciting prostitution. It's a relatively minor charge. And, of course, that gets everybody kind of, it gets their attention, especially the Palm Beach police leaders. They accused him of giving Epstein special treatment. Now listen to that, special treatment. You're going to see special treatment through this whole case, right up to his death, that is. So then, the police chief says, well, let's turn it over to the FBI. Let's let the feds go after him. If the state's not going to do anything, let's let the feds go after him. In 2007, then, the federal prosecutors, prepare an indictment against Epstein. After they prepared that indictment, though, a whole year passed. And what they're doing, well, they're going back and forth, his attorneys and the U.S. attorney. His attorneys and the U.S. attorney. His attorneys and the U.S. attorney. For 1 year, they're trying to negotiate a plea bargain. At first, they wanted to allow Epstein to avoid any federal prosecution. They were saying that all these witnesses are unreliable. But 37 of them? Come on now. So they all get together and they come up with this called, quote, unquote, sweetheart deal. That happened in June 2008. Epstein, he pleads guilty to state charges now. They kicked it back to the state. 1 count of soliciting prostitution. 1 count of soliciting prostitution from someone under the age of 18. Now, we all know that he did much more than solicit. We know that he participated. We know now that he abused these young ladies. And if it happens, you've heard of statutory rape, if an older person who has influence and power, it doesn't matter whether there's consent or not, it's considered rape. It's considered sexual assault. But yet in this particular deal, where he could have gone away for most of his life, years and years and years, he's sentenced to simply 18 months in jail. And under a secret arrangement. Listen to this. The U.S. Attorney Office agrees not to prosecute Epstein for federal crimes. It also agrees not to prosecute anybody associated with him for federal crimes then or in the future. Think about that one. That's a biggie for sure. You're going to see that play its course a little later in this case. So Epstein, he then serves his sentence in a work release program. That work release program, by the way, he could leave the jail under his own escort, in his own car, escorted by sheriff's deputies. Leave the jail to go to his office, plush offices there in Palm Beach, Florida, where he would run a charity that he made up all of himself as an excuse for him to go do his work in his plush offices. Had all kinds of visitors in and out. Could take walks. Could take some trips to his house. What sex abuser that's been put away for sex abuse would have that kind of freedom? Basically, he was gone 6 days a week to his plush office. Jail, well, jail, if you call it jail, was no more than a bad motel stay for Epstein. Then in 2009, as we get to the timeline here, Epstein is released from jail. Over the next decade, multiple women, well, they say that they are Epstein's victims, and they fight to try to get that federal non-prosecution agreement voided, hold him and others liable for the abuse. Around this time, one of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Guffrey, she says that in her lawsuits that when she was 17, Epstein and his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, that's a whole different story. So, they set up sexual encounters with royalty, politicians, businessmen, other rich and powerful men, including Britain's Prince Andrew. Of course, these people deny the allegations. But now we switch to November of 2018. Now the Miami Herald decides they're going to take a look at the case. And they produce a series of stories that, well, if you can do it in the newspaper era, it went viral. It did go viral online, and the newspaper stories got out all over America. But they were focusing on the role of a United States district attorney for the southern Florida area, a guy by the name of Costa, who by this point is President Trump's labor secretary. And they focus in on that unusual plea deal that landed him in a glamour slammer. And boy, that renews the interest in the case. And suddenly, Epstein, who had skated all this time, Epstein, who appeared to be untouchable, became touchable. Now, I'm hoping that this timeline will give you kind of an idea of what time which happened. But in order for you to really know what's going on, you got to know what's going on between those highlights in that timeline. And we're going to take a moment to go all over that with you. But first, it's time to take a break. Take a little quick break and share with you what we call Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, our Crazy Crook story today comes from Weddington, North Carolina, where there was a massive party. A massive party at a $4.3 million mansion. And it landed 37-year-old Michael Brown, landed him in the slammer. It appears that Michael Brown, he decided to throw a graduation party for his son. But you see, Michael Brown, he did not own a mansion. He was a landscaper. So he decided to hold a graduation party for his son while the owners were away. And sure enough, he did that. But the police were called. They really had some really loud music, I guess. And yet Brown, this crazy crook, he says, I really didn't break the law. I just broke some rules. Probably with my owners, but I didn't break the law. Well, the officers, they say they were called to the $10 million mansion on 12 Mile Creek Road last Saturday night. After the neighbors, they were reporting, their blocked roads, loud noise, a traffic hazard. When they arrived, Brown, he first claimed to be the owner, then the homeowner's grandson, before finally admitting that he was just the landscaper. He claimed it was a graduation party for his son's friends. Said they were aiming to, quote, create a positive environment. But also, now listen to this, thought he would generate a little income, you see. Deputies found that it wasn't really a wholesome celebration. Mostly teenagers, young adults, 300 to 400 people, a lot of underage drinking going on. That's what Lieutenant James May said. But deputies also, get this, seized more than $3,000 in entrance fees. Brown says, that just covers security costs. Strongly denied charging a cover fee, but $3,000, come on now. The homeowner's son, he said that Brown took advantage of his parents' generosity, insisted his parents did not know about the party, said he's a liar. He clearly told multiple stories to the officers. Brown, he said even though all that happened, he will not lose this family as a client. The son says, I think he's not only lost a client, probably lost all the other clients he had in the neighborhood. So this guy now, he's posted a $10,000 bond. He was charged with a whole bunch of charges, breaking and entering, damages, illegal behavior, all this sort of thing. This crazy crook who decided that he would throw his son a graduation party in a mansion that he did not own and had no permission to be there, he is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, speaking of crazy, this story gets crazy. While the case against Epstein began in March of 2005, there are things in the background that we need to recall, things that make Epstein somewhat a mystery man. Picking up from last week's podcast, in 1974, Epstein did begin to teach math and physics at the prestigious Dalton School. This was after he dropped out of college without a bachelor's degree. Pretty unusual for most of us. However, the headmaster at this time was a guy by the name of Donald Barr. He had done a lot of things as the headmaster that wasn't, it was actually what you might call out-of-the-box thinking. But now there are some interesting things about this. Now, by the way, the president said, just move on, folks, move on. Nothing here, it's all boring, but a lot of us find it pretty interesting. Donald Barr, you see, worked before he was the headmaster. He was in the OSS, otherwise known as the Office of Strategic Services. It was the forerunner of the CIA. Now, I think that's interesting, that this is the guy who hired Epstein. Because one of the rumors that's not yet been proven, by the way, is that Epstein got away with his abuse of young girls because he was tied to the intelligence community. And yet here's Donald Barr hiring him. Coincidence? Maybe. Certainly not proof. But Donald Barr, get this, who was headmaster of the school that Epstein taught in? Donald Barr, he's the father of Attorney General Bill Barr. Bill Barr, the Attorney General for Trump, who then ended up arresting and prosecuting Epstein on this last go-around that did land him in a real jail that he died in. So the father hires him, and the son puts him away. And like father, like son, Bill Barr himself really had ties to the CIA. He worked as a lawyer for the organization, several years actually. Started out as an intern. So look at that tie there. Both Barrs to the CIA, Epstein, involved in all of this. Now, does this prove that Epstein is a spy? Of course not. But you got to say, it's interesting how this sexual abuser, this serial sexual abuser, is connected to so many people. So after Epstein loses his teaching job, he lands on his feet, by becoming a part of Bear Stearns. And that's where he begins to accumulate his own personal wealth. Now, some have said that he was let go because of poor performance. That's been interpreted different ways. He was brilliant in math, so it may not have been his teaching, but maybe his actions. Some said he tried to be one of the students, showed up at the students' parties when they were drinking, paid very close attention to the young girls, sort of thing like this, that may have caused him to lose his job. But in a Puff article about Epstein, one of the parents of the students, they report that one of the parents walked up to him and said, quote unquote, What are you doing teaching math at Dalton? You should be working on Wall Street. Give my friend Ace Greenberg a call. Others say that, when he lost his job, he asked the people who had influence around there to make an introduction to him, to Ace Greenberg, who was head of the Bear Stearns great financial institution at that time. One thing for sure about Epstein, he knew how to collect contacts, and then he knew how to leverage those contacts to get the connections that he wanted. So now he gets a job with Bear Stearns. First, he comes in as an assistant to an option trader. Doesn't take him very long, though, to get noticed with a unique ability. It appears he had the ability to hide money, move money, in such a way that saved people much old money with the tax laws. You see, he was working in the financial market. But if he had not been in the financial market, many of us would consider the same thing as money laundering. But when you got some sort of license to move money, I guess it makes it different, right? So he found himself there at Bear Stearns helping out the most wealthy clients. He became a star in the quote-unquote special products division. There he advised clients on tax implications of their portfolios. He helped them with tax advantage transactions. In fact, in just 4 years after joining Bear Stearns, he became a limited partner. However, as it's been said, if you fly close to the sun, right? If you fly close to the sun, what does it say? You know what it says. It says you'll get burned. And while he was helping the wealthy at this agency, he got a little too loose with the rules. And in 1981, just 1 year after he made partner, he was then asked to leave Bear Stearns. According to his sworn testimony, he was guilty of a Reg D violation. You see, you're supposed to register those deals. And it appears he didn't register some of those deals. So I guess it got a little embarrassing for Bear Stearns, so they kind of got together and said, hey, you got to go. But even though he departed abruptly, yet he remained close to Greenberg and Bear Stearns. He was actually a client himself of Bear Stearns all the way up to the collapse in 2008. So now he's on his own. He sets up his own company, J. Epstein and Company, a couple other organizations that he developed as well. And there he began to handle some really wealthy clients. Now it's here where some of the speculation occurs regarding his ties with spy agencies. And this is important for two reasons. Number one, it might answer the question on why he got such a sweetheart deal from the government back in the 2005 case. And it could, for some people, explain where he got all that money. You see, there is a story about Epstein during this time where he was reporting, and it was verified, flying on an airplane with a guy by the name of Douglas Lease. He was a weapons dealer, and he was flying on his private airplane to visit the Pentagon. The Pentagon. Now, listen up. You're about to hear about a world that few people really know. You see, weapons dealings, it's done behind the scene. It does involve covering your tracks. Can you say the Iran-Contra? Remember Iran-Contra? Some of us are old enough to remember that. You see, in all these situations, everybody knows that if you follow the money, you'll find out all sorts of things. But what? If you cannot follow the money, well, you lose track of the money. The money is hidden. And who better to help the government or help other governments? Who better to help them in the world of weapon exchanges to hide the money? Who better to help them than the man that has been helping the most wealthy of the world move their money away from the clutches of the IRS? So this is where some people are alleging that he had involvement with the spy world. It is what some people say the government is trying to hide from the American people. That if that fact was really known, really verified, it might embarrass either our government or our allies. Now, I haven't seen any real evidence that this is totally true. But you can see the connections. And the fact that the government is still not revealing this stuff to us, it makes us wonder, right? To be connected does not mean that you participated. Just like that there were people that was connected to J. Epstein, who thankfully did not participate in the sex trafficking that he was being tried for. He could also have been connected to the spy community without being a spy. You see, I don't think a lot of these agencies have a little employee list that you look up, and say this guy's hired by them and this guy hired by them, but it's a lot of contractors involved in this, a lot of third-party people, you see. A lot of this is done off the books, you might say. So we now know that some others who were connected to Epstein did allegedly participate in sex trafficking. That's the reason Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison today. But could it also be that he participated in the spy world? Questions that we would like to see answers to. Now, I mentioned earlier a well-known podcaster and broadcaster kept saying they could not figure out how Epstein made so much money. Well, that answer is pretty simple. He managed the money of the wealthiest people in the world. This registered sex offender invested in multiple businesses himself as well. Not only did he manage a lot of other people's money, but he was a shrewd investor himself. So as he gets money from the funds of helping the uber wealthy, he was then managing those funds, his personal funds, in investments himself. And it became well known that Epstein, he would not take on clients unless they had $1 billion or more to manage. Now, you just take a bunch of clients with $1 billion and take 5% of a bunch of clients with $1 billion. Let me take that back. Just take a few clients with $1 million, $1 billion. A few clients with $1 billion and take 5% of that, and you are going to get rich just about overnight. And then, as I said, he wisely invested his own funds to accumulate wealth. You see, I don't see it really a mystery of how he made his wealth. It is more of a question of did his money get him that sweetheart deal in the first prosecution? We do know that he was able to hire the very top attorneys, but even with the best attorneys, that can't guarantee a good ending. Look at Ghislaine Maxwell. She had a great attorney. You see, many people think there's more to this part. The Palm Beach Police Department had a case against Epstein that could put him away for most of his life. Yet, when they took it to the prosecutors, including the federal government, it ended up no more than landing him into a glamour slammer in the county jail. And the Southern District Attorney, Acosta, who also was appointed by Trump, he stated in a Senate subcommittee, according to reports, he stated these words: someone told him Epstein was in the intelligence service. He should leave him alone. It was above his pay grade. Now, it's interesting that when he's pressed on it, he cannot say who told him, but simply that somebody did. But here's my take on it. Even if he was told that Epstein was in the intelligence world, the fact that this most infamous pedophile in America was given a slap on the wrist, to me, my friend, that is inexcusable. Inexcusable. And let me ask you this. If he was not tied to intelligence, if that did not happen to either our nation, Israel, or any other country who wasn't tied to intelligence, why doesn't the officials just tell us that? Why don't they just say, hey, move along now. Move along now. There was no tie. They are saying move along now. They're just saying everything is fine. Nothing to see here. But they haven't denied this. You know, that's been said before, right? Move along. Nothing to see here, even by our country. So why was it he got that deal? Was it simply because he had money? Was it because his high-powered lawyers outlawed the prosecution? Or was it that he had information that was tied to our nation's security? Is there something tied to our nation's security? Or was it because these victims were vulnerable? Many of them did not come from good homes. But let me ask you this. What if it had been the daughter of a U.S. senator that was abused by Epstein? What if it was the children of the pillars of the community? Would that have made a difference? What is it that the government is not telling us about Jeffrey Epstein? It has been 6 years since Jeffrey Epstein died in federal custody, and yet the government continues to withhold what some people said is thousands of pages of files tied to Epstein, his life, his death, his network. Earlier last month, the Justice Department wrote a 2-page memo that it would not release any additional Epstein-related documents. They're saying that there's a lot of information that are actually on his computers. Information that reveal who was being paid by Epstein, how his own money may have been hidden. So the question is why? Why can't this information be released? If it involves national security, just say it. Silence is not golden in this situation. It is a weight around government shoulders. I'm saying to the government, get rid of the weight. Get a load off your shoulders. Tell us what's really going on. Well, run out of time already again. This is a fascinating story. Join with us next week. We still haven't talked about how did Epstein really die? Did he really commit suicide? Or is there more to it? We're going to talk about that, a lot more next week. Till this time next time, Charlie Crimebuster here reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional information and podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.